we consider a parable, or really we consider a set of parables today that are, well, I consider them always the heart of the Christian faith, if you think about it. It's a set of three, actually, and they're spoken in answer to the Pharisees who have a problem with sinners coming close and listening to Jesus speak. They have a problem with Jesus seeking out sinners, for that matter, too, or associating with them at all. And that, in reply, Jesus really tells three parables, not just one. One of them is about a shepherd who goes and finds a lost sheep. In other words, he goes out and he goes and looks for this lost one. The other one is about a woman who has lost a coin and basically turns the house upside down and probably on dirt floor starts digging a little bit in the floor of her house to find here what is lost. And the last one is about this little episode with these three characters in it: two sons and a father and a couple of servants and all these kind of things. But they all say something in the totality of what they're supposed to answer. If you think about it hard, what happens to a single sheep lost in the wilderness? Those of you who are who know the ways of the wild, what happens to it?
It gets devoured.
It gets eaten very, very quickly. It just is what it is. So somebody, it has to be found. It has to be part of the flock if it wants to have any chance of survival. And if you are the shepherd, there is not much you can do other than look for it, because it's going to be a bad day for this one. And if you care as a shepherd, you go and you look. If a coin slips below the floor of a house, what happens?
Delete.
Well, if a coin slips below the floorboards of a house, hundreds of years later, somebody remodels the house somehow and rips up the floor, digs in the dirt floor or whatever, and goes, "Wow, look at this! Here's a coin!" But it's an accident. Now, it requires somebody to notice that something's missing, and to be willing to really cause a little bit of havoc. You don't. Have you ever torn up a floor in a house? It's messy business. Any of you ever lived in a dirt floor? Was a dirt floor? I think maybe the days when some of us could say yes to that are probably over, but it still is messy. You're going to have to. It's going to be dirty business to find this thing. And then if we get to this parable of the lost son. Every year I preach on this, and I think we preach on it actually every 2 years or so. We have a year where we don't. I keep wondering, who will I talk to in this parable, this particular time? And somehow the older brother catches my attention this time through. Okay, so I'm not an old. Yeah, I am an older brother, but I'm also a younger brother. I'm a blessed middle child. Actually, it's a cursed middle child. We're the ones who have an older brother, and we have a younger brother. And yes, the younger brother always seems to be the cut up over there in the corner, and the older brother always is mad at them. And the middle child is there to try to keep the peace. It's a lot in life. Somebody, God has to do it, and it's dirty business, I tell you. But if you look at this older brother, my question really is to him is, since he is the oldest of the house, and since I kind of know how this place of the oldest, the elder, it works, and since I always kind of, I'm always happy to read up on how the idea of elders and older brothers work in the... Do I have an echo, by the way?
No.
I hear an echo from over there somewhere. I think my electronics are working with each other. But I kind of have researched a little bit what elder brothers in the house were responsible for. In Jesus' time, elder brothers were responsible for their parents when they got too old. Their job was to take care of mom and dad until mom and dad died. In return, they were given an extra piece of the household. And so if they were also responsible for younger brothers later on after mom and dad died, so they had an extra part of the inheritance so that they could take care of the rest of the house after his elders were gone. What they were also responsible for were their younger brothers and sisters. Those of you who are older brothers know this. You know this trick. Your parents have done this. They left you in charge. In Jesus' time, they were assumed to be in charge. So when the younger brother walks up to dad and very precociously gets in his face and says, "You know what, I'm done with this, I'm out of here," something has already failed. There was supposed to be an older brother who, like in modern times, middle child, was supposed to go and actually say, wait, let's talk about this. Let's not have this happen. This is a disaster. We shouldn't. It was his duty, in a certain way, to see to it that his little brother would stick around, and that this offense to the father, given by saying, "I'm done with you," was not to happen. He was not there to do that. For some reason, he was not there. Not only was he not there to reconcile it at the beginning, when somehow that reconciliation that should have happened years ago finally does happen, he is unhappy about it. Some of you were here when we were celebrating Ash Wednesday, and somehow in the great psalm of Lent, Psalm 51 is the line, "Then I will teach sinners your ways." It applies here. Somehow you should be happy that the little brother shows up so that he can be again in the fold of the family, that he can be again one who carries out the family's ways, that he can be again in the community that teaches peace, that teaches mercy, and teaches all the things that make up the family. In other words, if you were Pharisees against whom this parable was being told, you were supposed to be happy that sinners return to God. And you probably should have looked within and said, how did these people ever get into this state? Where was I? If I am so learned in the law and am so good about the law, the law of Abraham, the law of Moses, here we are, then where was I? Where was I? You know what? I love this parable dearly. Because simply everyone who I know reading this parable probably comes to believe that God will have them back. In fact, if they read the other two parables that go with it, they're probably quite sure that God's looking for them, and that God will not leave aside even the dirt of having to dig through a house to make it happen. And those things are precious to me and very true. I still believe that this chapter 15 of Luke, is sort of the purest statement of the gospel that there is. but it has a sort of a dark side, if you so will, a warning attached to it, and that warning is that older brother. That warning is the older brother who, having lived in this salvation already because he is in the Father's house, seems to say, well, it's good for me, but not good for you. It is good for older brothers to sing the great song that all of us do so love. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like
You.
Thank you. She knew where I was going with this. The truth is that the older son, this little dark figure, I still pictured him with his arm crossed somehow, and his dark scowl somehow halfway turned. Whatever is going on, that is celebration, is over there. But who just doesn't want to, in the end, admit that he is as lost as everyone else, and that the song really is about him as well, and it must always be. For God saves sinners. This is most certainly true. And God saves sinners into a community where we are all dressed with the robe of baptism, where somehow we all have the ring that identifies us as one of the family, lest we ourselves forget, where we move about freely, and where there is always a feast when we gather again to remind ourselves and one another and anyone else who might have kind of shuffled in the doors that Jesus is talking here about all of us, and all of us must be received like this young one, because we're all outside the house, we're all outside the tent, and the invitation is always there. You're mine. You're my son. You're my daughter. You're my child. You're part of my house. You're part of my feast. Come as one of the household. Come, be at the feast. Partake of the feast. Be in heaven. Be in heaven here on earth. Travel about this creation of mine. You're my child. Don't forget.